This is why marketing is the most important function to every business, because marketing is responsible, it's embedded in the word, the market, right? Marketing is responsible for interpreting the external universe into the business and figuring out what are the opportunities out there, what are the nature of those opportunities, where are the customers, right? What are their needs and motivations? And then bringing that into the business and saying, right, how are we positioned to meet those needs and motivations in function of growing this business?
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Prosper podcast. I'm your host, Andreas Widmer, with my colleague, Rebecca Teddy. We're coming to you from the Sioka Center, the Entrepreneurship Center at the Catholic University of America's Busch School of Business. The Sioka Center is where innovation meets personal vocation.
Our guest today is a colleague here at Catholic U, Professor John Egan. He's an associate professor and director of marketing and sales at the Busch School of Business, and he currently teaches a whole bunch of courses, including marketing management, strategic marketing, professional sales.
And before joining the Busch School, John spent 25 years in the C-suite roles, building and executing growth strategies for venture capital and private equity-backed technology companies. His particular expertise is in formulating market-winning growth strategies for businesses in transitional situations. His professional interest is in marketing ethics, strategic business growth, Catholic entrepreneurship, and the psychology of consumer marketing. John Egan, welcome to Prosper.
Thank you, Andreas. Good to be here.
John, I'm going to hit you with our traditional startup question, which is, what are you reading right now? And what do you love?
Sure. Well, I love a lot of my reading is books on theology, but that's perhaps not the subject of today's conversation. At the moment, I'm also reading a book called Excellent Sheep by author called Yale professor called William Deresiewicz. That's probably the incorrect pronunciation, but he shares his observations on what the elite colleges, the Ivy Leagues, have done to their students in terms of kind of forcing them through a machine that produces stereotypical outputs or end products. And he has vast experience in this over 10 or 15 years. And he reports that many of the students who graduate from the elite business schools they're unhappy. You know, they've succeeded, so they pursue success as defined often by their peer group or the schools. And then when they achieve that success, maybe they go to work on Wall Street, for example. They may be earning lots of money, but they're just not happy people. And then they kind of hit a wall and have a crisis. So fascinating to compare the experience of students at those schools with those at the Catholic University and the Busch School.
Tell me what the book is called again.
It's called Excellent Sheep.
I got to check that out.
Yeah, it's so interesting because something Andreas and I often note is when we invite really successful entrepreneurs into our classroom, how many of them, their success came after they were successful in exactly the way that you just described, that they chased success. Maybe they went to the right schools and they got the right job and they were doing the right things and were super, super successful. And then they found it empty. And they'll do things, including things as dramatic as quit everything and go work as a missionary in Kenya for 2 years.
Yeah, wow.
Before they find their way back to some form of success that is actually meaningful for them. It's really interesting.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, life is a journey of self-discovery, right? So, and everybody takes a different path. So, I mean, even I suppose if you spend 3 or 4 years at an Ivy League school and you discover afterwards that you're not that happy, but then you discover who you are, well, then it's not a bad thing ultimately.
No, in that sense, it's never too late, as they say.
Yeah.
But so I find you and I have a lot in common. I mean, we're friends and we teach together. But also, just among other things, we're both from Europe and we both emigrated to the United States.
Yeah.
Tell me about your story. I don't think I've ever talked with you about this. What made you come to the US and what did you do in Ireland before?
Sure. So the immediate reason was I was working for a company called Trados, the language architects. And in fact, you were involved in this domain, Andreas, right? And Trados was the market leader in translation software So a little package that supported the work of human language translators, not machine translation. Um, and what happened was very successful, but the company grew a little bit too fast. And 6 months after I joined the company, the chief operating officer called me up and said, John, you're one of the only guys who has any marketing experience in the executive team. And we have a little bit of a problem. We're running out of cash. Can you do something about it? Right?
Yeah, that's good.
So, so what I did was I wasn't in a marketing role there. I was the general manager of Travis Ireland, looking after some big customers and managing their localization operation there and their production manufacturing. So what I did was I called up the best sales guy in the company, who's this wonderful German guy called Thomas Peinemann. I brought him to Dublin for a weekend, and I basically racked his brain. I tried to shake his brain and get an idea as what could we do in the market. And we launched this new product. We basically took a product we had that was sold to translation agencies, right, for thousands of dollars. And then we introduced some constraints in the product. And we initially priced it at $500, so 10% of the price of the traditional product, right? And then we had to figure out, well, that's not very good because we'll cut our nose off to spite our face, right? If we start selling it for 5,000, we're going to go out of business like really quickly. So it happened to be that year the company's 15th anniversary. And so we went to market with a message which was, it's our birthday and we're going to share the cake with you. And so there's a limited number of these packages. We're only going to sell, 1,000, I think it was, to start with. And you better sign up. So what happened was we launched this product. We thought it would, we'd hit 1,000 over a 4 to 6 week period. It sold out in 24 hours.
Wow.
Sold out in 24 hours. We had put one of the first e-commerce sites in Ireland up behind this, which is pretty shaky, but it worked. So we pulled in a lot of cash into the company quickly. Then the community of translators, which is a very tight community worldwide, right? It's about 300,000 or 400,000, or back in the day, there were about 300,000 or 400,000 human translators that work for the localization industry. And they got angry. They got very angry. The folks who missed the boat, and they started telling us about this, right? So what do you think we did, Andreas? What would you have done in that situation? You have 1,000 happy customers and you've got 300,000 really unhappy prospects, right?
Yeah.
And they want some of the joy. I'll take you out of your misery. Here's what we did.
Let me
Go on.
give me some time here.
Oh, you're older than I am. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's a good question. Yeah, exactly. It's a good question.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful problem. Well, the opportunity is to give the others a deal on it, no?
Very good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then how do you not upset the folks
you
who
need
got
to bring
in
them
first?
over the pond. Like you need to bring them
Right.
over. Maybe make them reviewers of the product. Like give them some honor.
Right.
Like
So
because it's a threatening thing, isn't it?
yeah,
to them.
Well, it's a sense of loss. They feel you've just upset your prospects. They're disenfranchised, right, without ever having dealt with the company. So what we did was we launched a second batch. So we said, oh, we've heard this from the community. We're terribly sorry. So there's another 1,000. It took 48 hours for this. Long story short, we ended up doing 10x our original goal, which brought millions of dollars into the company, solved the cash flow problem. Not only that, but this happened to be the same time when the founders were speaking with a new investor, and it changed the negotiation very dramatically. So the valuation equation changed. New money came in, and then, and this answers your question, then the investor said, okay, we need the entire management team in the US, because it was a US investor. And so I went home to my wife and I said, 3 young kids, hey darling, what are you doing for the next 2 years? Let's put right, let's drop it all. This is a great chance. It'll be an adventure. The kids are young, and she went through quite an internal process of suffering, and she said, okay, what the heck, let's do it. A couple of years, can't do any harm.
And that is a move from Dublin.
From Dublin to Old Town Alexandria, in fact, which is where the company was based. And those 2 years were all of 23 years ago, and we're still here.
So, well, ladies and gentlemen, you just got a little taste of John Egan in the classroom. He walked you through a marketing case study in miniature.
It was a lot of fun. And it changed. I mean, it changed my life. That's the funny thing, how these little moments, right, these defining moments can cause your entire life to pivot. We came to the US. We had 2 more kids. They're all grown up now. and our life is here, right? So we left Ireland behind.
I just noticed a little thing you said there. You said I wasn't in marketing at the time. What's your background actually?
Sure.
Like,
So I graduated from University College Dublin as an engineer way back in the day. Um, the Irish economy wasn't doing too well then, but Siemens in Germany needed engineers desperately and they couldn't find them. So they came to Dublin, interviewed a bunch of us, and took myself and 12 of my classmates over to Munich. And that's where I spent the first 2 years of my career, which was a great suffering at the center of Europe, traveling to Venice, Budapest,
yeah, I know, and it's the Siemens building right there on the Isar. Is that where you
No,
were?
I was in
It was
a
on.
place called Busch in Munich. They have many facilities there, but I was with the packet switch networking division.
I spent a lot. I mean, I used to live in Munich.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's a college
Yeah,
town. It's art and
yeah,
culture, and it's
I
central.
loved it.
Yeah.
But you're telling me that Germans couldn't provide their own homegrown engineers? That seems surprising.
They were, well, I think Siemens was on a growth path at that stage, and they were looking for hundreds and thousands of software engineers, and they weren't available in Germany. So they came and recruited us, and we didn't object at all. It was a wonderful experience.
But of course, engineering must have been handy for you in marketing because you actually understand what you're selling, right?
Yeah, I mean, where I benefited from engineering was a number of ways. Engineering is about processes, okay, and machines, systems. And of course, a business is no more than a collection of systems, right? You can view it through that filter. Marketing is the same thing. Um, so that was one benefit. And then it taught me to be incredibly analytical as well, right? In engineering, you can't get things wrong. You have to be detail oriented. You make a mistake with the design of that bridge, it's going to fall down and people will die. So the training is rigorous at that level, and I've carried that, in fact, into the rest of my professional career, no matter what I'm doing.
So how long did it last with the translation company? You moved here, and then how long?
I was with Trados, yeah, that was for 5 years. So 2 years in Ireland and 3 years in the US. And then as a result of that campaign, the competitor who was damaged by that campaign that I mentioned ended up having to buy the company because they just couldn't beat us. So they decided, if I can't beat them, I'm going to purchase them. And so the company was sold, and then I moved on to a startup venture after that.
Again here in DC,
Yeah.
and was it again a tech
Tech
company?
company, Approva Systems. So you might remember, Andreas, way back in the day, the Sarbanes-Oxley law came out right after the
Yeah, I do.
great financial crisis and so on, and then companies had an obligation to report against their Sarbanes-Oxley obligations, and there weren't a lot of solutions in the marketplace that would enable them to do that. And there was a very bright Indian entrepreneur who, came up with a solution, founded a company, and then I was one of the earliest employees in that company. We grew that for 3 years, and then again that company was sold on.
That's a bit of a golden touch you got
It
there.
was. I've had a lot of fun and a lot of luck as well.
Good. Well, let's pause just here for a second in our conversation with John Egan to invite you, if you're enjoying this podcast, to be sure to like us on social media and to like us in your podcast app, wherever you happen to listen to us. Leave us a great review and subscribe. All of that stuff really does help put this podcast in the ears of people like yourself who would love to hear it and can benefit from it. And to learn more about the show and the work of the Sioka Center for Principled Entrepreneurship, which connects innovation to personal vocation, visit us at siokacenter.com. That's Sioka, CIOCCA Center.com, or click the link in our show notes. We'd love your feedback and support. And now back to John Egan.
Welcome back to Prosper. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Professor John Egan about all things marketing. And John, one of the things we also share is we're practitioners who came into education a little late, but I know that I brought a lot of pet peeves with me, which form the center of, of what I'm teaching, the things where I wish everybody that I worked with knew. And you must have some of these, like you teach marketing. You're actually the head of the whole marketing division here at the Busch School. And so are there some, like, how do you define marketing and what are some of your great lessons that you bring in to make sure everybody gets before they leave us?
So great. So, one should always define the terms. The word marketing is a fascinating word. If we stepped out onto Michigan Avenue and asked 100 people and played a word association game, right, and asked them, what do you understand marketing to be? What they would tell you is advertising, social media, TV, communications, PR, all of those things, right? And all of those items are facets of marketing. They're what we would regard as tactical facets of marketing. But marketing is much more important than that. So what we define marketing as and teach marketing as is really it's the what we call the value generation engine of the business, right? Um, and every single business. This is why marketing is the most important function to every business, because marketing is responsible. It's embedded in the word, the market, right? Marketing is responsible for interpreting the external universe into the business and figuring out what are the opportunities out there. What are the nature of those opportunities? Where are the customers, right? What are their needs and motivations? And then bringing that into the business and say, right, how are we positioned to meet those needs and motivations in function of growing this business? Okay, so if you conceive of marketing as the value generation engine of the business, then you understand how it's strategically the most important function within the business, not necessarily component of the organization, but function. So in the entrepreneurship
Well,
domain,
yeah.
entrepreneurs are really, in essence, they are marketers, right?
Yeah,
Right? They generate value,
I
they
agree.
conceive of value, and they
Yeah.
bring it to market, stimulate demand, and then they have the problem of scaling that opportunity.
And some people then differentiate. I mean, you have marketing and sales in many organizations, and actually in our school we have the same thing. And so you also head up sales as part of you, and we're one of the few schools, no, who you offer a sales major or what?
Yeah, a sales specialization. So there are very few business schools in the US, in fact, even in the US, that have a sales program as part of their business school. I'm not sure exactly why. It's fascinating, but it makes us relatively unique. And our sales area is probably distinctive compared to the other areas in the portfolio because it is populated entirely by practitioners, right? So clinical professors like myself. Because it's probably the most practical discipline of everything in our portfolio within the school. And we've had great success with that. Creates an awful lot of energy among the student body. We do a lot of applied learning. We bring employers into the classroom, into career fairs, make the connections with the students, and prepare them then for future careers with those organizations.
Heard you say that you regret how utilitarian marketing can be at times. And in a way, by defining marketing in the way that you did, you've in a way already answered the question. But, but somebody who maybe hasn't heard your definition hears marketing and thinks, like, can I really be a good Christian and be a marketer? Because isn't marketing fundamentally dishonest? So tell us why that's not so.
I happen to agree that in practice it's almost entirely so. So I haven't figured out how I can.
Yikes!
I haven't figured out how I can answer your question. So, we have to differentiate between the conceptual side of marketing and then the marketing in practice today. And there is no shortage of evidence particularly in the US today, that consumer marketing in particular tends to be exploitative, right? It tends to be a practice of the end justifies the means, and the end, very explicitly, is typically it's a number, right? It's a prerogative to grow. You're reporting your results to Wall Street every quarter, perhaps, or your private equity guys are forcing you to, grow financially because they have to hit their numbers in order to sell your company, or whatever the motivation happens to be. But most of the commercial organizations out there today in the US are under this pressure to grow financially. And then that seeps into the job of the marketeer, right? Because that marketeer is paid by the company to execute, to pursue growth and deliver it. And then that influences marketing campaigns all over the place. I mean, some of the examples that I've come across recently are, quite explicit in this regard. For example, you'll be familiar with the whole buy now, pay later domain, right? Which is almost putting like a credit card on top of a credit card. and I came across an advertisement recently from a firm, and the line was, "Say yes to anything." Right? Say yes to anything. Now just think about this from an ethical, moral point of view. So an interpretation of that might be, I really don't care what you're spending your money on, so long as you spend it with me, right? No moral framework there. Reflected in the brand motto. I'm not saying that that firm isn't ethical, just to be clear. Another one is, and sometimes I give a talk on marketing ethics, and I ask the crowd this question: how many folks in the audience have Apple devices, right? And you can imagine how many hands go up, right? An Apple iPhone or whatever. And then I say, and then I present them with one of the apps that can be downloaded onto your Apple iPhone called Ashley Madison. Have you ever heard of Ashley Madison? No. Okay. So it's a particular type of dating app, and their brand motto is, "Life is short, have an affair." And another one of their advertising slogans I bumped into recently was, your wife is hot, but so are ours. So, right. Okay, now here's a game. Can you take a guess at how many users Ashley Madison has?
I mean, it's because of the culture we live in, that's going to be a high number.
Oh, take a swing. Now, obviously they're targeting mainly men, right? I mean, that's kind of obvious or intuitive. Andreas, give me a number. What do you think? How many users does Ashley Madison have?
Tens of millions.
60 million it peaked at in 2018. 60 million users have tried out the Ashley Madison platform, right? And Apple is distributing this opportunity, this functionality to its users. So how do we feel about this? Like, do we think that's right or wrong?
Yeah, it's demand generation gone awry,
Yep.
right? I mean, one of
Yep.
the things that marketing is supposed to do is demand generation, and this is going awry. And so what you're trying to do is to rein that in, or do you tear this down to the ground and then rebuild it? Or what's your approach here? I mean, you are releasing 60, 70 marketing experts into the market every year. So what's your approach?
Yeah. So when you peel the layers back off the onion, and you think about this, right, a little bit, it comes down to a problem of anthropology, right? What does that mean? So if we go back to those two examples, how do these firms conceive of the customers that they should be serving, right? Of the people that they're exchanging their goods and services with. And think about some of the words you'll be familiar with that we use in marketing. Okay, consumer. So we conceive of the human person as a consumer, an organism that consumes. And our objective in life is to maximize our share of wallet, right? Another great marketing phrase, right? So, when we want to convert people from prospects to customers, and we talk about engagement and mind share, how much mind share can I steal? So all of these terms really are utilitarian. And what they tend to do is they reveal a reductive perspective on the human person, right? On the other hand, if one has a different perspective, and perhaps you believe in a God and that there's eternity and things like this, and human people have a soul, then it would give us a different approach or disposition in front of our customers, because we might take into consideration things like, well, maybe before I promote my product or service to this person in a particular way, I should consider whether it's good for them or not, right? I should take all factors into account, because whatever this person does with my product or service is going to impact their life in some way. And what have I designed that impact to be? Okay, number one. Second dimension or perspective on this is, if I'm going to have millions of customers in the environment, then I also have to think about the society I live in, the common good, and even the physical environment. Do you happen to know what company is the biggest polluter of plastics on the planet? At one point in time, it was the Coca-Cola company. Okay, plastic bottles, millions and billions of them, and now we've got microplastics in our salmon and in our tuna and all over the place, right? So what does that reveal to us? Well, perhaps that company could have done a better job of considering the impact that its products and services have on the environment, right, on the common good, on society. So it reveals a deficiency. So anyway, I'm getting a bit long-winded trying to answer your questions. I haven't figured out, Rebecca, what the alternative is here, right? But I do know that the starting point, and this is this is what we try to instill into our students. The starting point is a consideration of the human person, right, and the dignity of the human person, because that's who you're interacting with. Marketing is responsible for the company's relationships with these persons, and we have an impact on them. So then I have to first ask, okay, well, what is this entity, this organism, this human person? Is it just an entity that consumes stuff and then expires at a point in time? Or are there other dimensions that I might like to take into consideration, or that I might have some responsibility for, right? Now, that doesn't mean a business necessarily has to be constrained. What that line of questioning actually is, it's a provocation to innovate. It's a provocation to expand your perspective on your customers and perhaps find new ways, more meaningful ways of delivering value to the market.
Do you have a positive example? Yeah, I'm trying to think about a listener. Like, we're hoping our target audience is, actually young entrepreneurs, maybe even older entrepreneurs, but people who are taking these questions seriously and maybe, do in fact have a positive anthropology, a more wholesome anthropology that they're working from. But sometimes we need some, examples to give us a sense.
And I wish I had more. I mean, you can find examples in the not-for-profit arena, right, for obvious reasons, because those organizations tend to be mission-driven, and oftentimes they don't have the pressure to grow financially. They have other sources of finance other than the folks that they're serving, right? But I actually haven't found many examples in the commercial space at all. The other difficulty you have is that when you go looking for examples, you perhaps find companies that seem to be virtuous, that seem to be doing good. And lots of companies do good, by the way, but not at their core. But when you pull on the thread of many of these examples, what that leads you to is what we call virtue signaling, right? It's that companies position themselves in the marketplace because it makes consumers happy, customers happy to think that they're spending their money, and it has, as a byproduct, it's doing some good. But you pull on the thread and you often find that it reduces that effort, in fact, to virtue signaling, which is not good. Yeah. So I think we need a revolution. I think we need a whole new approach to certainly to the area of consumer marketing, and in the US in particular. Pope Francis was very explicit about his opinion of marketing, and he used the phrase excessive consumerism in the world today is generating many of the problems that we see.
I mean, it's a similar situation with sales. I grew up in sales, so to speak, and I think there's a difference between, first of all, the anthropology, as you say, is this, what do you call it, a living organism at the other side, or is this a human being, an ever-living soul? And I think there's an approach. I always disliked the term generating demand in sales. I approach sales, and I think I don't know whether that's exactly how you're pursuing this and also marketing, but for me, sales is having an Advil and finding somebody who has a headache. And so the example is solution selling, relationship selling, and that is to match a need with a supply, with an offer. And if you do that, the holy grail of that is a repeat sale, because the person has a good experience and comes back, and you have satisfied a sincere, valid need. And I presume that's how we're teaching it, right?
That's exactly how.
Would you see that? The parallel is in marketing as well, to say, are we generating demand, or are we spreading useful information?
Yeah, exactly. So, and we have to differentiate, right? So my comments up to this point have really been about B2C, business to consumer marketing. Marketing in the B2B domain is entirely different. and there are some kind of embedded, guidelines there, if you will, right? That make it an easier domain to be moral and ethical in. So, for example, in the case of B2B sales, the person you're dealing with, they're not purchasing for themselves. So they're less prone to being manipulated, right? It's not so dependent on perception and psychological value. Very often you're selling to a buying committee. It's a group of people. There's an objective need in the organization, which tends to be specific, right? If it's a software solution or it's a machine, there are specifications. So there's an awful lot of objectivity to the need, and which forces an objectivity to the process of matching the solution to the need. So that's one dimension. The other thing that's good and a big characteristic of B2B sales, of course, is it's about relationships over time. So it's not transactional, right? It's not an e-commerce site. I click a button and boom, it's done. You have to, you've got to pursue a prospect. You've got to evolve a relationship. We talk about it being a mutual dialogue that ends up in a win-win outcome. So you travel a journey with the prospective customer. You're helping them discover what their real need is, and together you're exploring whether, in fact, you have a match to their need, right? So that consultative process ends up in a far more objective and informed decision at the end point. And then the other facet that you hinted at as well is that it's a long-term relationship. So if I buy even the consumer area, right, a car, but if I buy a machine, if I'm in business, or a software solution, the company needs to be there to support that over a multi-year time frame, right? So we're both more invested in each other, and so that's a far richer domain for a more authentic form of marketing, I would say.
I think I was thinking about an uncle I have who was just a brilliant salesman. And when we were talking, actually, he was in town the other day, and somebody was asking him about what made a great salesman. He wasn't even sure. But the thing that I noticed about him is that he really believed in the products that he was selling. He started out in office supplies, and he was doing things like, paper and paper clips and whatever. But he gradually, because he was effective at building relationships with people, he got really good at connecting people with the kind of ergonomic chairs. And he's so excited about these chairs. I mean, he's almost like a medical supply guy, because he drives his wife crazy, because he'll like go to the dentist or something, and he'll notice the brand of the chair, and he'll say, "Do you know how that chair works for you?" And he hasn't made the sale at all. But he said that when he was selling chairs, he sells people on this great chair, and then it gets delivered, and they bring it and they use it exactly out of the box. And so what he did as a salesman was then go back and personally adjust, the 15 different special adjustments that there were, so that chair actually did the thing that he promised. And when you have that kind of personal relationship with your customer, then they trust you. Like, he's not selling me something to solve his problem. He really does care about my problem. And that's ultimately the essence of sales, I think. Is
absolutely. I mean, you said to start with, he believes in his product. I think it goes beyond that. I think the orientation of that individual is that he wants to ensure that the promised outcome for the customer actually happens. The customer, in fact, experiences what he has promised. So beyond the product. And in fact, great salespeople, if the product doesn't work, they'll replace it, or they'll find an alternative product for the customer, because what they believe in is their ability to solve the customer's problem, however they happen to do that with the product, right? And so you've described very well some characteristics of a great salesperson, for sure.
John, if you would give advice to somebody who maybe, it's not realistic that people do major ads and stuff like this in a startup, especially if they bootstrap. But then that's one of the benefits of the internet, is that there's much cheaper ways today. You don't have to have a Super Bowl ad. What are some of your insights that you can share with maybe effective low budget things or campaigns to do that you think kind of pay off for a startup?
Well, I mean, it's all about social media. I mean, social media is the most accessible and cheapest way of spreading the news about your product. What's the company? there's a couple of examples of companies who have never spent a dollar on advertising. Sarah Blakely of Spanx fame. You know Sarah Blakely? Rebecca, perhaps you know Sarah Blakely. Yeah,
Yes.
I haven't.
Why are you looking at me?
Well, Spanx is it's clothing for females. I've never, I don't wear Spanx products. In fact, at least not that I'd admit to in public, right?
That makes two of us.
So Sarah Blakely never spent a dollar on advertising before, I think it's her 10 millionth order. Extraordinary. Sarah Blakely was the youngest self-made female billionaire entrepreneur in the US, the youngest female entrepreneur to reach $1 billion in net worth. Extraordinary. In the history of, not the US, in the history of the world, right? And she never spent a dollar on advertising before her 10 millionth order. How did that happen? Andreas, you know how it happened.
Influencers, I presume? I don't know.
Word of mouth. Her product created such an impact for the women who found value in the product. They would buy the product, put it on, go out for a night, feel like $1 million, right? I asked my wife about this product, and she said, it makes me feel the way I want to look, right? Which is bad English, but somehow it had. Yeah, well, it had this impact, and so what do you do then if you're a woman and you go out and you tell your friends, and then all your friends can't get enough of this product. Word of mouth, zero cost. Now, that's a unique type of example. Social media gives the same type of potential to scale at a very low cost, if what you have to sell is good, which is the other great thing about social media. It's transparent, because it works in reverse, right? If your product or service doesn't do what it's meant to do, then the word is going to spread as well, and you won't sell anymore. And so I would say that's certainly for entrepreneurs, to your question, for startups, entrepreneurs, Andreas, that's the route that they've got to take for sure.
And do you think there's always a debate whether the ads on there and paying for, do you get always the offer, do you want to boost this post and stuff like that? Would you allocate money to that if you have a scarce budget already?
Well, yeah, I mean, if there's the return on investment, so it depends entirely on the product market scenario, right? If you can throw some fuel on the fire and it really takes fire, then do so for sure, rather than just waiting around and hoping that it scales. So it's a question of return on investment and how much budget you have available.
It changes so quickly. I mean, that's Rebecca and I do a lot of this in class to teach. You get the students after us who started a small, like a social media business, influencer business, or a blog or whatever. But I think one of the effective ways that we're doing, which kind of works, it's the beauty of us having 230 people in a class, is we can actually say, let's release the product right now, everybody in the room, and then let's promote each other's stuff, and you get a rise out of that. And the algorithm does react to it. You can see it. But if you don't have 230 of your best friends right next to you, then who just push the algorithm to react, and then an ad might help, because it gets, especially if you're smart about how to define who to put it in front of, because even the ad only reacts if you get a rise out of people, if they actually click on it or even comment.
And so to your point, of course, the fundamental thing is not about the ad. It's, do you have a precise idea of who your target is for this product or service that you have? Because the more specific you can be about that, then you can start to ask, okay, well, where do they hang out in social media, right? And which channels specifically, and then you can target your advertising or marketing spend more appropriately.
Now, look, I know this is only the tip of the iceberg that we're touching here, but it's always, even when we're just seeing each other in the hallway, so it's always a joy to work with you. I admire what you do. I'm glad you're here on our team, and thanks for sharing with us a bit about the work you do here, and for giving our listeners for something, sort of a short course in effective marketing with the caveats and the opportunities.
Hey, speaking of admiring what you do, I don't, not to embarrass you, John, but I don't think I've ever told you something that really moved me during the COVID period. I don't know if you remember this, but we have a colleague, a project that's since moved out of our office, but you were collaborating with our former colleague Brian Becker on a project to help a couple of key local businesses work on their marketing and their business strategy. And then, of course, COVID hit, and there were a lot of small business owners who were just not only so hard hit, but such wonderful examples of taking care of your people. And Brian told me about your having a meeting with one of these guys who was, not taking any salary himself in order to be able to continue to pay his workers, and all these different steps that were actually quite common. But Brian said that you looked that guy in the eye and said, what you're doing is heroic. And Brian said that the gentleman actually teared up because he was just working so hard, and nobody sees sometimes the real, like, in other words, people tend to say that businesses are greedy. And at least at the level of small business and medium business, in fact, you often have people who are working really hard to give their customers great value and take care of a team. And I thought it was just beautiful that you were able to acknowledge that. And at least for that one moment in time, the guy was seen. And I've always loved that story. So thank you for that.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Appreciate it.
Well, with that, we'll just close with one other thing, which we'll make sure to put in the show notes, which is, how can our listeners find you if they want to? Is it a LinkedIn, or how can people get in touch with you if they want to know more?
Sure. LinkedIn, John Egan 99 is my handle on LinkedIn, or email me, eganj@cua.edu. That's the easiest way. And I'm an open door type of guy. I like meeting new people. So open the floodgates for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you, John.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Rebecca, to once again help me do this. And thank you, listeners, for spending a quick 40 minutes with us. We wish you well, take care, and until next time, in every way, we hope you prosper.